So can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we can get started. The numbers have pretty much stabilized at 22. So today, what I'd like to do is just give everyone a brief overview of this initiative of starting a Diamond Open Access journal in planetary science. And what I'm going to do today is just give you a brief presentation that's about 10, 15 minutes long, just to give you the status of where we are and what we have to do over roughly the next year. And afterwards, I'm just going to leave the floor open for questions and discussion. So I don't have anything beyond roughly 10 slides. So hopefully afterwards, hopefully someone here will have questions or some ideas on what to do or differences of opinion or whatever. Just it'll be an open platform to discuss how we should go forward. Okay. So I think if you join this meeting here, you know why we need to create a new journal. And these are just my list of pet peeves I have with the publishing industry in general. First is that most journals that we publish with have paywalls to access our own scientific work. And if there's not actually a paywall, someone else paid for you, most likely your university or your government or someone else has paid. Many of the journals that we publish with have extremely high article processing fees to publish as open access, and this ranges somewhere from roughly $2,000 per article up to $11,000 or more. Most of these journals, even though they charge us a lot, they do very little to promote the work that's published in the journal. There are the procedures for how these journals work are in general opaque. Even when you work at these journals, as an editor-in-chief, it's almost impossible to change long-standing journal policies and procedures. And lastly is that I think most of these journals, in essence, are exploiting free labor from authors and reviewers for their own profit. So what could we actually do better? Well, the first thing we do is create what's called a Diamond Open Access Journal, and this would be free for authors to publish in. It'd be free for readers to download the articles. It'd be free for libraries, and it's free for everyone. Now, there is a small cost, and we'll get back to that later. Secondly is that in planetary science, we'll have a variety of different article types. And in addition to just having research articles and letters and reviews, we think we need to have special article types for missions and instrumentation, for data sets, for numerical codes, and also commentaries. Also, I think this journal, which would be community run, would be transparent. It'd be community run with an open forum for changing journal policies. Also, since this journal would be run by authors and readers, it would be very responsive and proactive to the needs of the authors, hopefully with a rapid implementation of new ideas. Next is that hopefully we can come up with better ways to promote the journal content, and this would be using things like social media, a journal blog with article summaries, and things like images of the week. And then lastly, I think that we can do a better job of getting better reviewers and quicker reviews. And this will be by the creation of a reviewer expertise database to identify underutilized reviewers who are often early career. So can this actually be done? Well, in the past several years, there's been really an explosion of Diamond Open Access journals in the geosciences. This started with Volcanica in 2018. They're currently publishing about 30 articles per year. In 2022, a journal Seismica opened. They're publishing roughly 60 articles per year right now, and they expect to go up to 100 very soon. Last year, 2 additional journals opened, Tectonica and Sedimentologica. This year, 2 more journals opened, Geomorphica and Geophysical Research. And next year, we're expecting to see 2 more journals, Geodynamica and Advances in Geochemistry and Cosmochemistry. So how much would it cost if we wanted to do this entirely by ourselves? Well, it turns out that it's actually very cheap. The most expensive thing is that we just have to have some kind of web hosting to host the journal platform and website. And if we go with Public Knowledge Project, who is the company who builds this open journal system software, which is free and open source, this would cost us about $1,500 per year. Then we'd need to register a domain name. That would cost about $10. We'd have to pay an annual registration fee to Crossref. This is mostly just to get DOIs and to to submit metadata for articles. And this is roughly $275 per year. If we published 100 articles, we'd have to buy 100 DOIs, and that would cost $100, $1 per DOI. And lastly, we'd probably have to pay for some kind of plagiarism detection software, such as Authenticate. And through Crossref, this would cost about $55 for 100 manuscripts. So when you add this all up, it comes to less than $2,000. And in fact, the biggest fee here is the web hosting. And if you host this yourself, it would actually be much cheaper. And most of the other journals I mentioned on the previous slide, they pay less than $1,000 per year to run their journal. Now, there are a couple of things that aren't included here, which are important. One is copy editing, the other is proofreading, another is manuscript production, which is the conversion of author files into PDF and HTML. Now, most of the Diamond Open Access journals I mentioned, they use volunteers and also editors to do these tasks. But this is something I really don't want to do with this journal because we are already busy as it is. And I just don't think it's reasonable to expect that the editors and the readers will perform these types of tasks. So this is why we started looking into a collaboration with the open publishing services at the University Paris-Cité, which is called Opus. Opus, they opened in September 2022, so it's fairly young. And they provide hosting services using the OGS journal management software. And they also provide copy editing, proofreading, and production services at a cost, but what costs I'll show later, which are actually pretty reasonable. And it turns out that since this is they're fairly young, this would represent their first serious journal in the physical sciences. So I think they are very interested in seeing this type of project. They're very interested in seeing this project and having it work out. So how much would it cost to work with Opus? Well, there's a few things. One is there's a 600 euro setup fee, which is just to set up the server, install the software to help us work out putting up the website and working together to create some LaTeX templates. Then there'd be a 1,200 euro annual server maintenance fee with support. And then the next thing would be production, which would be the conversion of author manuscripts to PDF and HTML, which would include interactions with the authors for corrections, the uploading of metadata, attribution of DOIs. And under the assumption of 80% LaTeX to 20% docx submissions, which we can discuss later, this would come to roughly 10,000 euros. So it's roughly 100 euros per article for production. Now, they also offer some services for copy editing, proofreading, bibliography formatting, and language correction, but this is much more expensive, about 20,000 euros in addition. So I think what we have to do for this journal is just considered production and not copy editing. So if we publish 100 articles with production but no copy editing, then that comes to 10,000 euros per year. Now, a couple of things to point out is that, first of all, the first year or two, we're going to publish fewer than 100 articles, so this will be somewhat cheaper. Also, these prices are somewhat approximate because we can discuss with the university, we can do some of the tasks ourselves. And also, what's probably the most important is that we really have to define what the expected ratio of LaTeX and docx submissions. And if we really need to cut costs, we could go to a LaTeX-only submission format, which I would not like to do, but that's one option. Okay, so how about funding possibilities? Well, there's a few options. The first option is to go directly through the University Paris-Cité. They're the people who fund the Opus, the open publishing services. And I think this is the most plausible way of funding this journal. The second option is to go through the institute where I am, the IPGP, Institut de Physique du Globe de Paris. They are a geoscience institute that's actually within the University Paris-Cité. So in some sense, the money is coming from the same pot. It's just we just decide who's going to give us the money. A third option is the research group, the Planetary and Space Sciences group at IPGP, where I am. They have said that they could probably provide initial funding for the first year or two if the funding costs are low, like 5,000 euros per year or something. I've also talked to Europlanet Society. These are the people that run the EPSC conference in Europe. And just based on some informal discussions with members of the board, they seem to be interested in such an idea, and they would probably be favorable to funding us a few thousand euros per year. And the last possibility is to go through a French grant system or a European grant system. I haven't looked into this yet, and I'm not really sure which program is appropriate, but I think that this route would be very complicated, so I prefer to fund this in-house at the university itself. Okay, so this is just a kind of a brief overview of what I think the roadmap will look like in order to get this journal open for submissions in January 2026 or before. I think January 26 is a pretty, I think it's easily done within this time period, but we could probably do it much faster if we really wanted to. So before the end of the year, there's a few things I think that we really have to do. The first thing is to pick a name for the journal. I know this sounds dumb, but it holds up a lot of other things, so we really need to pick a name pretty quickly. Another thing is I think we need to finalize some of the most important policy documents. This would be such things like the journal scope, the peer review procedure, and governance of the journal. And also, I think we need to write an LPSC abstract and present a poster at LPSC describing this initiative. And the deadline for LPSC this year, I think, is January 7th. So we still have time. Now, before LPSC, what I think we need to do is to create a website with some basic info just to increase the community participation and awareness of what we're doing. I think we need to begin the process of creating a journal logo and visual identity. And we also need to decide upon the expected editor workload and the number of required editors and associate editors we'll have for the first year or two. And at this point, just before LPSC, I think we should try to create an editor and associate editor search committee. So when we're at LPSC in March of 2025, I think there's two things we should probably do. One is reserve a breakout room for community, just to have a community information session. And also at LPSC, what I think we should probably aim for doing is to have an announcement for call for editors and associate editors. During summer and by the end of summer, I think what we should try to do is finalize the editorial board, launch the reviewer expertise database, finalize things like the manuscript templates for authors, and also finalize the manuscript preparation guidelines and submission checklist. And before we launch, we also have to think about giving some training to the editors with this OGS journal management software, and also finish writing some of the remaining journal policies. And there's a lot of policies that have to be written, but in the end, I think a lot of them aren't too important, and it's not critical that these are done before we launch. But if possible, we should try to get as much done as possible before launching. And then hopefully it launch into January 2026 or before. Okay, so I think there are some risks that we need to be aware of. The first risk concerns money. We might not have sufficient funding to provide manuscript production services. Even if this is probably not a problem for having something like 50 articles per year, we really need to think about what happens if the journal becomes popular and if we scale up to the size of Icarus or JGR Planets, which is roughly 300 articles per year. So this is a risk we need to be aware of. Another potential risk is we may have difficulty in assembling the editorial board on a short notice. I think within 1 year, it's feasible that we can do this, but we need to find a well-known editor-in-chief, and we probably need 4 or 5 respected editors, and we probably need a handful of additional associate editors as well. All these numbers are to be discussed, but I think these are the kind of ballpark range of numbers that we're looking at. And the last risk, I think, is just insufficient interest from the planetary science community. And this is partially because the first year or two, we're not going to have an impact factor. And also, for the first couple of years, probably as well, the articles will not be indexed with Web of Science. So I think for some of the more senior researchers, these kind of things aren't very important, but I understand if for early career scientists, this might be a red flag. Okay, so anyways, in terms of homework of what I think everyone here has to do before we before our next meeting is everyone really should go to the Mattermost forum and look at the names that have been suggested and just give some brief comments, whether you're favorable or not. And next week, what I'd like to do is just begin kind of a down selection process where we can get the range of names, which is about 20 so far, down to something that's more manageable, about 5 or 6, and then probably have some kind of vote in roughly 1 month time period. Also, what I think everyone should do is try to go to the forum and review some of the text that's been written already for the website. For example, we've written a short journal blurb, which is just two sentences long. It shouldn't take too long to look at. We have a journal scope, which I think is pretty close to being done. We've written some text describing the manuscript types that we'll be accepting. And also I put together just a kind of organizational diagram of what the website will look like in terms of content. Next thing I think everyone needs to do is also go to the forum and look at the discussion regarding the peer review process and governance. And as soon as we get more comments on this, then we can start writing up some kind of document that we'll put on the website as well. And the last thing is that this is really a community project and everyone's welcome to participate. So if you know of anyone who's interested in being part of this initiative, please forward this presentation to them. Please give them the link to access the forum. And also there's an email list and you can ask them to subscribe to the email list. Okay, so anyways, that's all I have to say right here. And I'm just going to open the floor for discussion or questions or comments.
Hi, this is Maarten Roos speaking.
Hi.
Hi, I don't know if you can see me or you hear me well, yeah?
Yeah, we see that you're walking as well. So
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I will not try not to walk. So thank you for your presentation and for the initiative. Very good. So I see this is being recorded. Will you share this? And can I, if yes, or host it on a YouTube somewhere, this video? And if yes, can I share that with the Europlanet community on Discord? Because I think there's quite a number of people who might be interested in this. And I saw your answer to my question whether I could distribute this link on Discord too late. So I'm really sorry about that. But yeah.
Yeah, so I will put this presentation on the forum and anyone can download it and distribute it to whoever they want.
Okay, great.
I think when I stop this meeting that I'll get a link to the recording and
Correct.
I would be happy to give it to you. I'll put that on the forum as well. I suspect
Brilliant.
that no one here has problems with distributing the video. So far, it's only me and you talking, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, I have no problem with whatever you do with the video. If you think it's
Okay.
worthwhile putting on YouTube or on the Discord forum for Europlanets, that I'm okay with that.
Great, thanks. Because I think there's we have 300 or 350 people there, so it could be interesting. Yeah, thank you so much. Excellent. Yeah. Looking forward to participate. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead, Laurent.
So
Sorry.
You said that at least initially, the papers will not be indexed in Web of Science, which I think is a major issue for a lot of people, as you mentioned a little bit. But does that mean that the indexing will be eventually happening retroactively? Like we can go back to issue 1 and get people back on a Web of Science after a couple of years? Or is that like, no, too bad, your paper's published, but nobody can know about it ever again?
Good question. First thing I would say is that there are other ways where we can index the articles. So I think it's fairly easy to index through Google Scholar, which is used by a lot of people. And also there's a bunch of other indexing services, but they're non-ideal. And in terms of indexing with Web of Science and Clairvat, as far as I understand, they will index it retroactively, but this is something we should look into. And there's a process involved where you have to apply for them to, well, there's 2 processes because they're both involved with the journal impact factor. So there's a process where after 2 years of the journal being open, you can apply to get a journal impact factor. And it's the same company that does the indexing with Web of Science. So the two processes are kind of related. I actually don't know all the fine details, but this is something that we need to look into. And I agree, it's a potential problem. For me, the impact factor is less important than being indexed, but I understand that some people, think that both of them are important. In terms of these other open access, Diamond open access journals, I am pretty sure that Volcanica and I think Seismica are already indexed on Web of Science, but I'll check that afterwards. And
Yeah, I could find
you know,
Volcanica, but not the other. However, I'm trying to see if the first paper that published is findable in Web of Science.
yeah.
I was not able to do it, but again, sometimes it takes a little bit of poking around.
Yeah, so I'll check that as well because I agree that this is a problem and we should make sure that if this is a problem, that it should be done as quickly as feasibly possible.
Mark, I have a question also. So this I don't know so much about, but do you think it would be relevant to add extra cost to pay to be ranked higher up in the search engines like Google or others? Like when you type the name of the journal, it's going to be at the very bottom of the list. But I don't know, is it relevant to pay at the start of the project some advertisement money?
Yeah, I don't know. The way I look at this is that this is going to be roughly a year-long process to get the journal up and running. So there will be enough time for things to be indexed. And as time goes on, there'll be more and more content added to the websites. And it's kind of one of these things where the more people are using it, the better it gets indexed. So, if we have to, we can consider it, but this is not really a cost that I would like to put out there. And also in terms of paying for search engine optimization, I think you have to go through each individual search engine. So it'd be either Google or the other ones. And as I think everyone here realizes, the Google search is getting worse and worse. So I don't know if we really need to be paying to get us to the top of the list. I'm pretty sure that if you search under Volcanica and Tectonica and things like that, they come at the top of the list. And part of that might be because their name is unique. So that's another thing to think about when we search for a name, is that having a name like Planetarica may be more unique than something like the Open Journal of Planetary Science. So these are all kind of things that we should be thinking about.
Yeah. Can I continue? So thank you very much for this initiative. I think it's very important. I was trying to do that a couple of years ago, but it was quite difficult to have the inertia to make it work. So I think it would be very good because I see a lot of people in the room here. So I think it's really good. What I think maybe a limitation, because I've seen this for all the journal that you mentioned, is that it's always hosted in the university, in one university website. And so if we really have a journal that is for the community, I think it would be good. So I clearly understand that the funding is coming from somewhere, so we need some logos there. But I think it would be good to have it as general as possible. So we have to make sure that it's not considered as the journal from Paris or the journal of IPGP. It has to be the Planetary Science journal that is open. So I think this is very, very important. And there are some funding and initiative. For instance, in my university, I am in a board about, I would say, open science at the University Paris-Saclay level. I'm sure they will be very happy to join this. But of course, if you host it in your university, they will really make some some discussion or some break about the system. So we have to take care of that. I don't know how it can be solved, but I think this is really something that we have to take into account. So I don't know if you already thought about that, but the other project that I've seen
Can I respond to that
always
first?
hosted by the university and one single university, isn't it?
Yeah, so just to your first point, so if with the first thing I think is just to have a URL, which is the name of the journal .online or something like that, as opposed to doing what Tectonica and Seismica do, which is something like seismica.mcgill.university. And I totally agree. I think that we should, since this is a community project, it shouldn't look as if this is a project being run by Paris, the University Paris-Cité, and IPGP. One way to do that is just by having the logos as innocuous as possible at the bottom of the web page, just saying, we received funding from these people. The other way, which is perhaps better, is that by having more logos, everyone's logo is lost in the noise. So, if you are proposing to fund a certain aspect of this, and we can add, the logo of GEOPS and the logo of Saclay and things like that, then it may look more as a community-led effort, and also it would kind of reduce the importance of the so-called founding, members that are hosting the journal. So yeah, I'm quite aware of this, and I don't want this to look like it's a project coming from a specific place. But at the same time, it will be hosted by someone, and whoever pays the money, they're going to get their logo at the bottom of the page somehow. So.
Yeah, sure. So it's of course part of the difficulty, but I'm not against the logos, but I think we have to take care about this part. Because I don't remember which journal, but in one journal that you sent us, it was really associated to one particular university, and I think this is a very bad image that you give on the journal by itself.
I think there are other solutions, like Mark mentioned. If you look at the Volcanica website, right? I mean, first off is jvolcanica.org. So there is no hosting, there's no at whatever university. They do say they're financially supported by Press Universitaire de Strasbourg, but it's not like they just say financially supported. They don't say hosted by.
Yeah,
so
this is fine.
Then you can add other
and of course, I guess they are open for someone else funding it. So if we want to stay for a long time, this is also a risk if everything is coming from one single university. So I think it would be good to have something that is coming from either a general international group like Europlanet, as you mentioned. I think this would be really good. Even if they don't fund that much, I mean, this label will clearly make sense, and many hosting universities. I think this would be very cool. Okay.
Yeah. So another couple points is that first of all, I want to make sure that if we do host this at University Paris-Cité, that we can actually move the journal elsewhere in case it doesn't work out. And I think all the journals I've talked to, they have some kind of agreement that, if they decide, within a 6-month or 1-year time period, they can move the journal from one place to the other. So hopefully that's not a problem. The other problem, other potential way is to get funding from a bigger institute in France, for example, that might be CNRS. I think CNRS, in the end, like 10 years from now, I think CNRS will be paying for these types of things. But the other option is to try to get a grant from the European Union. I think that's going to be very complicated. I really don't want to do it, but I think that would kind of alleviate some of the concerns you have about this being located at one specific institute.
But Mark, Opus is linked to Paris-Cité, or?
Yeah, it's the open publishing services of the University Paris-Cité.
Yes, so it will give you all the website and the way to transfer manuscript to editors and how to and the way to communicate in between editors, etc. So it has to be based somewhere, I guess.
Well, it doesn't, because the software we're going to be using is called OJS. This is open source software that anyone can download and use.
Yeah.
And I think the only interest of going through Opus is that they have these production services where we can give them the author formatted LaTeX file or the author formatted Word file, and they will convert it to PDF, convert it to JATS, convert it to HTML. They will upload the metadata to things like Crossref and things like that. So in terms of the journal software, we could actually do that ourselves anywhere. It's really just the production aspects which are interesting for me.
Okay, but I think that the ERC should be interested given the large amount of money it gives to all the grants for open publication, and it's nothing for them.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing we should think about is that, for the first year, I could fund this myself through our research group. So, and then the second year, maybe IPGP will give us some money. And then maybe year 3 or 4, after we start getting lots of submissions and we go up to, 300 articles per year, then at that point, I think we should, look for a funding partner that can pay more than 10,000 euros per year. And that may be something like an ERC or a CNRS type grant.
Yeah, so back to Frédéric's point, I just post on the chat a link to a hosted journal by the Opus service. So as you will see, there is a logo claiming that they support the fees and they are hosting the journal website. But when we meet the service, it never mentioned that we are not allowed to put additional logos because they are potentially expecting that we may have funds from additional partners. So I don't think there is any issue to add any additive logos if we get support from ERC or another university or communities like EPSC. We can go back to them and ask directly these specific questions, by the way.
Well, I guess I could respond to this question in the chat about the other journals, about which ones are the most successful and whether we can have some kind of mentoring with them. So I have talked to several people involved with these other Diamond Open Access journals, most in particular Seismica. The thing to realize is that all these Diamond Open Access journals are different. So journals like Tectonica and Volcanica, they're kind of smaller journals where, at least from the outside, it appears that it's not a community-run initiative. It's just a small number of editors that decided to put these journals together. Seismica, on the other hand, is on the other extreme, where it's really a community initiative where the entire community got together and decided that they needed this type of journal, and because of that, they have there's more people involved, and there's more chances for people, just general researchers, to get involved with the project. In terms of mentoring, again, it's very easy to talk to these people. There are a couple chat channels online. There's this thing called the Guild of Diamonds, which is a Slack channel where pretty much all of the people that are involved in these geoscience DOJs can come together and ask questions. It's not used very much, but that exists. But in terms of, for me, the biggest problem in terms of mentoring, it's not really about putting the journal together, putting the editorial team together, the review process. To me, and I think anyone's been involved as an editor, these things are kind of self-evident how they should be done. The really complicated issues really have to do with the production aspects. So when you get, a Word document from an author, how do you convert it into a final manuscript that you put on the website? And that's the most complicated part. And people like Seismica, they've developed their own tools to do this themselves. But I would prefer not to do this. And this is why I think going through something like Opus would be useful, because we can just pay them a little bit of money to do the most annoying aspects of the of the production aspects. Yeah, and just as for some context, I think that they said for Seismica, when they work with a LaTeX file, it takes about 3 hours to do everything. So to convert it to HTML and PDF, upload the metadata, and then get a DOI and upload it to Crossref. So it's roughly 3 hours of work per article when it's LaTeX. For Word documents, they said it's roughly a full day of work. Because there's always problems with converting the docx file into the intermediate LaTeX file format. So
Okay, so we have to learn our student how to use LaTeX, and that's it.
well, that's a big question, because when Antoine and myself went to Opus the first time, we were saying like, well, it'll be mostly a LaTeX journal, but we'd like to have some Word submissions for people who aren't familiar with it. And it's just the Word part that raises the price, because there's so many complications involved. So yeah, one option is that we can go entirely LaTeX, but I don't want to do that because I think it will exclude some members of the community. There's a lot of geophysics type people online right now, and for us, like, LaTeX is very easy, but I totally understand if you're do geomorphology, like maybe you don't have a reason to use LaTeX because you don't have that many equations in your papers. So this is something we really need to define. And we have to go back to Opus and get some different quotes to find out how much more it would cost if we had 80% Word documents as opposed to 80% LaTeX. Frederick, your hand's still up?
Yes, I don't know, Lucia, you were also raising your hand, so maybe you can start because you were first. I don't know if you are still online.
Yes,
Oh.
thank you, Fred. No, actually, I was just gonna mention the Diamond Guilds, but Mark already mentioned it. I think at some point it would be great that we have a meeting with them. My understanding is that they have regular meetings, and so I guess a lot of questions that we are getting at the beginning of this project, they also had the same question at some point, and so probably they also had the same discussion, and maybe a meeting with the Diamond Guild could help.
Yeah, the one thing I would say about the Guild of Diamonds, the people there are great. Unfortunately, it's held on Slack, and it's the free plan. So all the previous discussions where people have pretty much asked the same questions I'm asking right now, those are in the history that is greater than 90 days away, so we can't read them. So I tried to convince them that they should move to Mattermost or something like that, where the discussion would be online forever, but there wasn't too much interest in that. But I agree that it may be useful to have a meeting with a few people with some of the other journals in person. And if this is something that you want to help organize, that'd be great. Because I've already talked to several people on the forum.
So yes, what I wanted to mention is another initiative that you probably know. I mentioned that in the Mattermost. I think it's interesting to discuss that. Maybe it's not the good way to do it for us, but I think it's interesting to discuss about what are different ways of doing this open science journal. And so I had some contact with PCI, so Peer Community In. I put the link in the chat, but you also have it in Mattermost. I think it's something that is really interesting because it not only is a Diamond Access journal, so I think it's fully funded, and for my understanding, they can even accept new journals completely for free because they just add enough journals and funding to take someone else. So of course, if we start with 100 journal more, it will not work. But if it's something that is only one journal, I think they will be very interested by that, and so the funding will not be the problem. For them, the most difficult part is, as you mentioned, to be known and recognized enough to start with enough inertia to continue for a long time. And I think this is very, very important. And it's also true, of course, whatever the solution. And the other thing that I think that is very interesting with this peer community is that the idea is that you don't have a formally set of editors and associate editor. Everybody can do this job because actually the job of an editor or an associate editor can be sometimes very time consuming. And so I think the concept is interesting that so not everybody, but I would say a lot of people can do this job. And the idea is that you somehow edit one paper per year. So if you have 100 associate editor, each one is doing the job for one paper. So I think this is of course interesting in a sense that it will distribute this work. And the idea is that you are not really an editor; you are, they call it a recommender. So it means that basically you give your name on the fact that this topic is relevant for the field, and you're taking charge of the review. So it doesn't mean that the paper will be accepted, whatever it will be, but it means that you are taking basically in charge this work of an editor, but for one single paper. Of course, if you are very motivated, you can do it for 10, but the idea is that you do it for a limited number of papers. So I think this is interesting. Then, as you also mentioned, Mark, I think this is true. Actually, it's really based on archive and open database without any review. And the idea is that you have a layer on top of it that will actually review your article. There are even some concept, I don't know if you know that, they do that, for instance, in astrophysics or even in math, I think. You just write your review directly on the top of archive. So there is even no really journals. It's just contributing to the scientific discussion directly on this kind of purpose. So this is maybe too extreme and a bit difficult in a sense that at some point you have to have a fixed paper with a DOI so you can cite. And so I think peer community is interesting in that respect because it really defines a paper that goes through a review. And the idea, the concept is that all the review process is public when it's accepted. So the publication, of course, all the draft, but also the peer review, but only if it's accepted. And first, when I learned that, I thought that it was a bit strange. But actually, the argument is to say that if the paper is rejected, you don't want to add an extra weight on it. And so they prefer not to mention it at all. But if it's accepted, you know all the arguments and maybe the weakness that are not appearing at the end in the paper itself. So I think this is quite interesting to have something that is open. So I don't know if it's possible in the system OGS that you mentioned, if the review process itself can be open also.
Yeah, just a couple comments. First of all, I encourage everyone to to look at the website that Frederic just mentioned, because if this is what the community wants, then we should consider it. In terms of open reviews, like this is something that we will need to decide as well. I would say almost all of the Diamond Open Access journals, they make the review packets, the review report open. So there's a file you can download, and it has all the correspondence between the author and the editor and the reviewers. I think this is what we should do as well, but I know some people don't agree with this. This is something we have to decide at some point whether we want the review report open or not. But just to give other people context about the difference between peer community in, or whatever it's called, and what we're doing, I think that type of journal is kind of referred to as a so-called overlay journal, because in essence, what happens is the author puts their manuscript on archive or some open archive, and then the journal decides to review it afterwards. And if it meets the criteria of the journal, they put it in an issue. But the thing is, the final published article is still on archive and not hosted by the journal itself. So the journal, the peer community in journal, they don't actually format the articles to make them into a nice issue the way that something like JGR or Icarus or something would do. So that's just one of the main differences, is that the initial manuscript is hosted on the archive, and the final manuscript is hosted on archive as well. So that's one of the big differences. But that also makes it cheaper. So, it's that's why people are interested in that. And I think, as I mentioned on the Mattermost chat, I think, at least from my perspective, for communities that are really heavily reliant on these preprint servers, like Archive and the astronomy and astrophysics community, I think this is a great way of doing things. Personally, myself, I don't use open peer preprint servers too much, so I'm less familiar with it. But this is something that everyone should think about. Okay, so who's Rona? Why don't you go ahead?
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I had a general question. Apart from being open versus the format we have today, how do we want to position this journal compared to, in terms of scope, acceptance rate, etc., compared to JGR Planets, Planetary Science Journal, EPSL, etc.? So are we offering the community something distinctive from that point of view as well?
Yeah. I just put this up here because we did kind of put the scope together. But my general attitude is that the scope of the journal is everything that's in JGR Planets and Icarus, plus things like missions and instrumentation papers, plus descriptions of data sets, plus descriptions and numerical codes. So to me, in terms of the scope, I think this would be the big difference, is that it's more or less the same in terms of science as JGR Planets, but we will have different types of articles which serve communities that are generally not very well represented in Icarus and JGR Planets. But also in terms of how we distinguish ourselves from these other journals, I think one of the big things, well, besides price, which is zero, and besides the difference in the scope, I think it's going to be because this journal is a community effort, and the policies of the journal are going to reflect the people that decide to publish with them. So if for whatever reason our community decides that we want to go down a certain route and explore different ways of publishing or explore different ways of promoting research, I think we can do this very quickly because it's a community-led effort, and I think this will be one of the main differences. And perhaps Laurent can speak to this as well, but when I was an editor-in-chief at JGR Planets, it was extremely difficult for me to change any of the policies for JGR Planets, because it's a big journal. It's been around for a long time. There's a formal way of making proposals to the publications committee. Most of the time when you make proposals, they never get back to you. Maybe things have changed since I was there. But to me, that was one of the main problems working at these big journals, is that it was just very difficult for for an ordinary scientist or even someone working with the journal to change the policies and direction of the journal.
It's true that JGR has this oversight by the application committee, and they are essentially the one who decide who has the final say on what is on the scope, etc. One thing I would want to add what you just said, Mark, is that it's not just JGR and Icarus. PSJ is another one, like kind of halfway between, but also don't forget ESS, the Earth and Space Science Journal, which has also code data sets and things like that. So essentially what you're envisioning here is a
one-stop shop.
encompassing all of those journals in a sense.
Yeah.
Would say.
Yeah, and also I don't look at this journal as being like a competitor to any of these other types of journals. If people want to continue publishing with JGR Planets or Icarus because they think the editorial team is good, they should. And perhaps these big journals, they will have better services for for the production aspects of or copy editing. So there may be reasons why people might decide to continue publishing with these other journals. So I don't really look at this as being a competitor. It's something that's different. And I think philosophically, it's very different because we're using a completely different economic model for publishing scientific work. If you look at AGU's tax returns, they make a huge amount of money off of publications. So they have no interest in bringing costs down whatsoever, and they won't unless they're forced to. So I think. I just think we have to do this because there's no way that Elsevier or JGR is going to reduce costs.
I think this is a little bit misleading on the AGO side, but we can discuss that offline. And I'm not going to discuss about Elsevier, but there still is something else behind.
But I will find their most recent tax returns and post them online for everyone to look at. It's mostly publications and meetings that makes tons of money. So.
I guess maybe I can focus my question more. I don't think we're trying to maybe compete with them per se, but like, is there like a minimum number of publications that we want to attract in order to stay alive? From that point of view, if nobody thinks there's an advantage beyond some people don't have an issue with the money, depending on the structure of their funding.
Well, I recently talked to well, I won't give them their name, but a researcher in the US, and they prefer publishing their work and in Icarus because it's free, and because of that they can have an extra 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 euros per year to fund students and things like that. And at the same time, this researcher does not agree with the politics and policies of Elsevier. So, I think there will be an interest for having a journal that is free. And I think that there will be an interest if you can choose between Icarus free versus a community-led journal that's free. I think a large fraction of those people will choose this type of project. In terms of how many manuscripts we should aim for publishing, when I look at journals like Seismica and Volcanica, they're both fairly young, so they may grow with time. But Seismica, they're publishing about 60 manuscripts per year, which I think is good for their community. And they want to go up to about 100. And they say that with their model, they think they could probably support publishing 200 manuscripts per year. But I am not very optimistic because of all the production and copy editing that they have to do themselves. But for this type of journal, and given the size of the planetary science community, and given that the scope goes from cosmochemistry to geophysics with everything in between, I think that we really should aim for, if we have less than 100 articles per year, I would consider this kind of project not a failure, but not successful. And as I mentioned before, in terms of the other major journals, PSJ, Icarus, JGR Planets, each of those, they publish roughly 300 articles per year. So, I think that's kind of what we should be hoping to achieve within roughly a 5-year time frame, especially after we get an impact factor.
Great,
just
thanks. So
to
because we're
comment-
not for
Yeah, sorry.
profit, yes, sorry. So we actually don't have to have it in order to fund ourselves unless some of those institutions that would contribute money would want it to have some sort of reach, I guess. I mean, 100 sounds like a very good goal to me.
Yeah, and also in terms of the impact factor, as Laurent mentioned earlier, I think the more important issue is whether your articles are indexed in Web of Science, and that's something I'll do some research myself to see what the exact process for that is and how long it takes, and whether they retroactively go back and index the first issue or not. But also, I think in terms of things like impact factors, well, I think there probably are certain communities and maybe countries that take these things more seriously. I know the science in China is changing a lot, but it used to be that, impact factor was very important for them. And many people would choose to publish in Icarus instead of JGR Plants just because the impact factor was higher, because it was, more of an astronomy journal than Planetary Science. So some communities and some types of people probably will consider having that an impact factor is important. And, I think we just need to be aware of that. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that. It's a minimum of 2 years until we get an impact factor. Martin, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi, thanks. So yeah, I think with the impact factor, it's just a question. We have to just do it and just, sit through the 2 years and that's it. We want this, so we do this. But no, I was wondering. So what I'm hearing is that in terms of the cost, right? Most of the cost is form, in a sense. Am I correct? It's not in content. It's more the form, the production. So I guess the question you could ask: how important does the community find it that the form is, nice and slick and everything, or can we do with houses of different colors in the street, or does the whole street have to have the same, aspect? So you could save a lot of money if you have a simple template and people can sort of, I don't know, just thinking aloud here. Okay.
No, I totally agree with you. I think for a lot of authors, they would be happy just to provide an author formatted PDF and put it on the journal website. And as long as it looks good, that's good enough. The second complicating factor is that a lot of people now don't read PDFs, but they read HTML directly from their browser. So we would have to have some kind of conversion to HTML. And then the other thing, which I don't fully understand, is that a lot of libraries, for whatever reason, they use a format called JATS, which is a XML-based version. And this apparently is important for indexing and for discovery and for things like that. I don't fully understand why, but all of the libraries want to have JATS versions of the manuscripts. So this is something that, there has to be another conversion from LaTeX to JATS. So I think there has to be some form of production involved. In terms of the author, they don't see this kind of stuff in the background.
I know.
They just see the PDF. Yeah.
Right. Because, websites, for example, just a simple example, if you take, I've been experiencing with this quite a bit, you take the RST, the restructured text format. It's very simple. You write your stuff and then you can, compile it and it comes out HTML and it looks great. So, there's maybe solutions to this that are easy, but okay, it is maybe quick talk. So thanks. Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think in the future, and by future, about maybe 5 years from now, I think that there might be a set of tools that we can use to do this pretty easily. The problem is now is that, when I talk to the Seismica people, the biggest problem is that when you take a Word file, the author is going to break the template somehow. And so you have to go in and manually tweak things. And then the other thing is that there's problems with hyperlinking to figures. And also I think that another big problem is formatting of the bibliography. So there's always tweaking of these types of issues. And they've developed a lot of tools to do this, and we could do it ourselves. But I think it's really another 5 years until there's like a set, the toolbox where people can use with that thing.
Maybe. Yeah. So the Seismica people developed some software themselves.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see what that entails exactly, and if we can improve on it. Who knows? I mean, maybe it's a delta difference to improve. I don't know. Maybe it's complicated. I don't know.
Well, they have a GitHub page with all their tools
Okay.
online, so it's all open source. And,
okay, cool. We can take a look at it. Actually. Yeah.
The thing is, the people there's a lot of people in Seismica that are really good and interested in programming, so they were very happy to develop these tools themselves.
There's
And
a lot of programmers among the planetary scientists as well.
No, I totally agree. We just have to find them. It's just for whatever reason, Seismica, they attracted a lot of very good people that were doing programming. And, one of the things they developed was this reviewer expertise database from scratch, which is very good. And we can download their code and use it ourselves. But they just had a bunch of people interested in programming that put these things together themselves. And now we can use it for free. And if we can, find people in planetary science that want to develop these tools or build upon what they did, that'd be great. Right now this is our first meeting, so I haven't found.
Exactly. I know, of course, yeah. Well, if I would be interested, but see how much.
But even with these tools, it take them a day to handle a Word document.
Well, they have tools for dealing with Word. It's just that, as I mentioned, I think the authors always break the template. And
I know. That's what I'm pointing out. Is that even with those tools, it still takes a day of work to handle a document like that. So it's not a negligible amount of time.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think this is something that we can maybe try to aim to do ourselves in the future, but I don't want to start from scratch right now, because I just seeing the workflow that they use, it just seems like a lot of efforts. And if we find like a group of students and early career people that want to waste their time doing production stuff, that's great. But I don't see the interest in that. It's we're all busy as it is, and I don't want to spend an extra couple hours per week, reformatting someone's paper from Word to LaTeX.
Yeah, I would say early career people and students probably have better things to worry about than formatting
they should have their
Word document from some old fart somewhere else who couldn't figure out how to use a template.
Yeah, actually, someone mentioned, I'm just looking through the chat, someone mentioned the Mars Journal. So this was an initiative by Dave Page, which is very similar to what we're doing, where it was free to publish for authors and free for readers. And a couple people I've talked to, they've said, I'm not sure if I'm really interested in this project because look what happened to the Mars Journal, which it was successful for 5 years, and then they kind of just petered out, and I think just stopped accepting submissions. But I think there's two big differences between them and us. First of all, is I think what they did was way ahead of their time. This was 2000. When was it? Was it 2011 or something time period? But it was
2011. Starting in 2005.
Yeah, so it was way ahead of this current explosion of diamond open access journals. They didn't have recourse to these tools like the OGS journal management software, which have been improving over and over with time. So I think they were just way ahead of their time, and it just didn't work out for them. And secondly, the Mars Journal, their scope was very limited. It's Mars. 10 years ago, Mars was still like a very important part of planetary science, but as everyone knows, it's really exploded. And today, I think something like the Mars Journal would probably be successful if they launched today, just because of that. So does anyone have any other questions? Just one comment. I think it'd probably be a good idea if we have these types of meetings once per month, if we do plan on launching 1 year from now, that's just, roughly 10-ish meetings. So I'll try to organize a meeting before the end of the year. I have to look at my schedule to see when AGU is, but probably just afterwards. And I think the next also I'm going to try to write a 2-page LPSC abstract, and I'd like to get everyone's input on that. And everyone who's here is welcome to be a co-author on that. So, but I'll try to get that done before the end of the year as well.
So will you try to set up a meeting perhaps with the Sysmica people also online, or?
Yeah, so what I would suggest is that the people who are interested in attending such a meeting kind of try to self-organize on our Mattermost forum. The question is like, who do we want to talk to and what do we want to talk about? If it, I think we've kind of, when I first started looking into this project, 3 months ago, I had a million questions about how to do things. And I've kind of read through all the documentation they put together and talked to some people offline. So I kind of figured things out myself. At this point, for me, the biggest unknowns are just things like the funding and also the journal production. And then there's also some, things we have to work out about whether we want to do any form of copy editing or not, or any kind of quality control, and whether we need to develop any kind of simple tools just to make sure that there's, things like hyperlinks to figures and stuff like that work in the manuscript. So to me, I think the biggest questions I have are mostly just technical, related to production and related to copy editing. In terms of like, how do you put a journal together? I don't know. I feel like I understand how it should be done, but I've been working on this for a couple months. So, maybe not everyone's up to speed with me. But I'd be happy to try to put a meeting together, but it'd be useful to get some, input from the community here as what do you want to talk about? One thing we could talk about are just like high-level philosophical issues, such as like, how do you keep a journal like this going over time, and what are the kind of pitfalls that we should be looking out for? So that's one kind of discussion we could have. Another discussion would be just technical aspects. Another aspect might have to do with kind of the peer review process, about things like having open reviews and things like that. Another thing which would maybe be useful, just like what kind of workload do we expect editors to have, given that we won't be paying anyone. So, for me, I think in terms of workload, it's, 1 or 2 papers per month for an editor is probably all we can expect. But this is something that we could also discuss with them. So anyways, for those who wanted to have a meeting with these other teams, just kind of let me know like what kind of questions you want to ask, and I'll try to discuss with them offline and find the right people to talk to.
Sounds fair.
And I would add the same for PCI. If you are interested by this peer community I think they are really happy to discuss. So we can invite them very easily if you are interested in.
Yeah, in terms of this, I really suggest that everyone look at the peer community project and see if this is the route we should be taking. It's different than what we're doing. It's cheaper, and in some sense it's easier. But at the same time, I would say it's less formal. I think what I've been describing so far is something like taking JGR planets and doing it in ourselves. Peer community is a bit different, where it's based on requiring people upload all their stuff to the archive and things like that. They're both models that can work, and everyone here should think about it. And if that's the approach that people want to take, then we'll do that. So
maybe something in between, maybe something,
Just want to say, I think we have at least one person heavily involved in geodynamica who has been active on Mattermost. So
okay, good.
We have some contact there as well. They're not that much further ahead than this group, but a little bit.
Well, geodynamica, I've been told that they wanted to launch in January next year.
Yeah, so they're just 1 year ahead of what we're discussing.
Yeah,
But
so
they outwent a little bit ahead.
yeah. Yeah, they've taken a somewhat different approach for organizing this. I think it's more of a closed community where they have probably, a smaller number of people involved, but who are more motivated. With this project here, I've tried to get everyone who wanted to get involved, regardless of how much they can, devote to such a project. And my preference would be to have a, really a community-led planetary science journal, as opposed to having a journal led by a small number of people who decide to put it together. So to me, that's one of the big differences between what we're doing and what they're doing.
Yeah, and the planetary science community is very diverse, right? So I have all these different sub-communities. It's the big one. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's another thing we have to, take into account is that, I did my best when contacting people about this to get everyone from all the different domains in planetary science, but obviously I'm very biased by the people I know, which are mostly on the geophysics side. So, again, I just want to really emphasize that, people here, like, just let your colleagues know that this is happening, and the people that are interested, just let them know that they're welcome to participate. And I think when we start looking early next year, when we start thinking about putting together a search committee for editors and associate editors, this is something we really need to think about, is to make sure that every community is represented in some sense.
Yeah, that's really important. I think Europlanet, I'm pretty heavily involved with Europlanet, could be a good help here as well to to get the message out to the whole community. So I will pull some strings as well there. Yeah.
Yeah, also, I'm not really in charge of this project, so if anyone here can feel free to do whatever you want. So I'm happy when people, take the initiative and do things like that.
Okay, thanks so much, Mark. I need to go, but we will be in touch, everyone. Thank you so much for all your time and your effort here.
Well, thanks for showing up.
Great. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, have you looked into like private or foundation funding? I mean, like there's some organizations that are nonprofit that may be interested in some of that.
No, I haven't. And, I think this is also something we need to think about is, in terms of what Rona mentioned about how do we distinguish ourselves from other journals. To me, there's something attractive about not being associated with society. Not being, for example, like Icarus and the Planetary Science Journal, they're part of the DPS of the American Astronomical Association. Like,
I wasn't necessarily thinking about a scientific society, but say the Keck Foundation or the Helsing-Simons Foundation, this type of places. I don't.
Yeah, I don't know anything about this. If you can send me some links, I'll look into it. The first thing is actually tomorrow I have a meeting with, I was supposed to have a meeting with the direction of IPGP. And they, as far as I can tell, is that they're very interested in supporting this project. The only problem is that Edward Kaminsky, who's the director of he's the president of University of Paris-Cité. The good thing is he's a geoscientist that came from IPGP. But he made the point that if they decide to fund our initiative, for 10,000 euros per year, then next year there's going to be a similar initiative from the physics community, and then there's to be another initiative from another community, and at some point this may be too expensive for them to support. And the way I'm going to spin this is that we are the first serious journal, and they're taking a gamble to see whether this is going to work. They put a lot of money into funding Opus, and if you look at the Opus website, what is there is it's not spectacular. So this would be, one of their first real successful journals. And after they can show that they can do it, then I think they will have to make a decision as to how many journals they'll support in the future. But I think this is one of the issues that the direction is going to have, is like, even if this is sustainable for one journal, UPC is a huge institute, and other people are going to come along and ask to do the same thing. And at that point, hopefully at that point we'll show that we're successful, and that then we can easily go to CNRS or go to the European, Research Council and ask them to give us 50,000 euros per year to support this type of initiative. At least that's
Personally, if I was abroad, I would love to face that problem with a lot of people want to come to their journal.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
So Mark, so
Nicola.
hi. So your attitude would be to fund this first couple of years with what you sort of have already secured, and then try to go bigger rather than trying now to to look for additional alternative funding.
My attitude is that I would prefer to find perennial, stable funding from the very beginning.
Okay.
But that's what my line will be with University Paris Cité and with IPGP. If they want to get involved, I'm going to tell them this is a journal that's going to be, if it's successful, it will be here till, we all retire and beyond, hopefully. So this is, 10, 20, plus year commitment. And I think it's important for at least these big institutes to make that commitment very early. They may say they can't. They may say, well, we can commit for 5 years and we'll see how things go. To me, that would be acceptable. If we're successful in 5 years, I think it'll be very easy at that point to go to the European, Research Council and ask for money, or to go to, one of these big national, funding agencies in any country in Europe to ask for funding. But I would prefer not to take an approach where we, piece together funding from different institutions, and every year that changes. And then to me, it just seems like it's going to be a lot of hassle and a lot of stress. And I would really prefer to have, secure funding from the beginning.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Thanks.
I mean, I think it would be, if we don't have like a long-term path to maintain a journal, people will hesitate even more to join in which case that's going to make it less likely to succeed. It's like, because who would want to be, oh yeah, I published in journal, and it's like 5 years later, it's like, in what? Nobody heard about it, it's gone. No, you want to have some long-term plan.
Yeah. Yeah, but also I think that the publishing landscape is, at least in Europe, is going to dramatically change in the next couple of years, because they've been really forcing us to go open access. They've really been pushing these cooperative agreements with like Couperin to make it cheaper to publish. And I think that these research institute, or things like CNRS, and they're going to realize that it's going to be cheaper to give us 50,000 euros per year than it is to buy subscriptions to all the AGU journals and things like that.
The thing is that the CNRS then is going to say, yeah, but what if it's a researcher from the US trying to put their paper in there? We are supporting the US researcher. And then
I agree. CNRS will have their logo at the bottom, so that's what they get out of it. But I totally agree. And that actually is a different funding route, is that there is this thing called the what is it called? ANC? ARC. There's a new journal that just launched called Geophysical Research, and I forget where they're.
That's the worst name possible. I mean, there's no way you find that on a Google search and you end up on the journal.
I really tried actually, and I had a hard time finding anything.
They just launched. In their defense, they just launched. They don't have any publications. But they have their approach is that they formed some kind of cooperative where I think that I think that their approach is that if you come from their university or any university who decides to associate with them, then publication costs are free. And the expectation is that those universities will pay for the production costs. But if you come from a different university that's not associated with this research network, then you have to pay full cost to pay for the production costs. I don't think this is a really great strategy, but I think there's 2 universities that are already associated with this ANC or ARC initiative. So, it's just something to be aware of. It's a different way of doing things, but I just don't see it as being sustainable.
It's not really different from the current like transformative agreements that are in place between a bunch of universities. Not every one of them, but a bunch of them, and various publishers.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's time to get out and just have a beer together.
Yeah, I think we bored everyone to death. So,
go across time zones, whatever.
So is anyone going to AGU this year?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Oh, not me.
It's just down the street for me.
But yeah, I
Sure.
think I am planning on going to LPSC this year, even though I have two reasons not to, one being Trump, the other being Texas. But but I'm going to make an exception this year just for this project.
I don't know. You could also save your energy and just go to EGU or something like that instead.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to get in contact with the planetary science community will probably be LPSC. EGU is another possibility. Europlanets is possible as well, but it's a different community than LPSC, and it's, as the name implies, it's very European based.
So
But yeah,
all
anyways,
of
I
the
think
resources that you mentioned.
yeah.
If you're advertising the initiative, going, repeating that, what you'll be doing at the LPSC for at EGU and EPSC probably will be
Well,
worthwhile, right?
this is the other thing, is that hopefully, first of all, I'm committing the time to launch this journal in 1 year's time, but my hope is that other people become committed as well. And I'm hoping that there will be some people who take the initiative and say, yeah, I want to present this work at EGU. I don't plan on going to EGU, but if someone's going, like, I hopefully we'll find people that are motivated to put together a poster and describe the project to people. I'm only willing to do so many things, and at some point this needs to branch out from just having one or two people that are doing all the work into being more of a community-led project. And to me, that's the biggest concern I have, is that we really need to just make sure everyone is aware of this project so that people who are interested can participate. At this point, I think there's a lot of people like us are interested in maybe the philosophical parts of launching a journal, but then there's also a lot of people I've talked to who told me, oh yeah, I'd be interested in maybe being an editor for this when you launch the journal. So I think there's a lot of people that would be interested in publishing and interested in working as an editor, but I think finding people to do the hard work for the first year, that's going to be a little more difficult. Okay, any other questions? If not, I'm going to close the meeting since there's only 4 other people here. So, and I'll see you and Nicola next week, probably at one of these meetings I think it's a juice meeting you're going to.
Yeah, no, I'm not at the juice meeting. No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, all right.
Are you coming here?
No.
No. Okay.
I don't know where it is, but I know there's 3 meetings next week with either
Okay.
Beth or juice. So, okay. It's good seeing you guys.
Thanks very much.
All right, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.